Thank you to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Datamagnet, Cat Crab Lobster, DuckMachine, Try Again 95, Astraya the Dreamer, Mezec, Feudic Jarl, Germanchemist, Casper Arnholtz, and Chaos to Must. Thank you very much. Story number 1. Adrenaline. It's a hell of a drug. Written by Warp Mind. Astraya, Chief Inspector of Station Security, surveyed the devastation in what had up until recently been his favorite cafe, an Apex station. So, this is the one who did all of this, only stopping when his blood loss caused unconsciousness. You'd best take me through everything the human Ithilia taught us, from the moment he began lashing out. Tornus, the cashier, nodded soberly, pointing out to the corner table. Well, first he gripped that corner table and ripped it from the wall, and used it to bludgeon 2 Cathayas here, as you can see from the one being collected by the paramedics there. The table shattered under the strain, so the second one survived the initial battering. Astraya nodded, looking towards the stocky, somewhat koala-like individual being lifted up on the stretcher. Okay, I'm impressed. Please continue. Tornus swallowed. After that, he picked up the water kettle and tossed the boiling contents, followed by the kettle itself, in the face of the rasher curled up in the corner there. Astraya frowned at the large reptiloid, whose face was covered in serious burn marks and a nasty-looking open fracture on the forehead. Damn, the kettle opened up his forehead like that. Tornus nodded. Yes, sir. He then grabbed the Utheran by the neck and started beating his face with his free hand, while dragging it towards the counter so he could, bludgeon its head against the edge. It was gruesome to watch. Astraya frowned at the outline of the floor. Definitely a Theran in shape, except the head looked like missing, would be the preferable for whoever had picked it up. Continue. Tornus pointed at the 3-armed, recently 4-armed insectoid body with a rather large blade sticking out of it. Then the Zantek threw a weapon and tried to get the human off the Utheran, and the human disarmed him and stabbed him several times with his own knife. Then, when the Zantek finally toppled over, the human let go of the knife, stumbled towards the door, and fell flat on his face. Astraya nodded thoughtfully, and then frowned at his notes. Wait, they never landed a blow on him during the entire fight. How did he pass out from blood loss then? Tornus shook his head. Oh, no. He was just sitting at the corner table, enjoying his lunch, and the other 5 marched through the door and shot him at the back. They were out of ammunition and approaching his slumped-over form when he rose from the remains of the chair and let out that hideous roar. Astraya blinked a few times. Wait, they shot him first, and then he tore them and the place apart. Bloody Death Wielders. End of story. Story number 2. Hippity Hoppity, Get Off My Property. Written by Original Rich Game. The war with the humans started like most wars did, for land and money. It was a general rule that the more land you had, the more imposing and respected you were in the galaxy. And the humans had a lot of land. And for money, well, that is obvious. The humans didn't have imperial values like most of the big powers and refused to subjugate another species for their own benefit. But yet always seemed to be the ones with the most brutal history of the empires and were the most powerful. Then the war came. It was over the resource-rich Glorvax system. The system had never been habitable to any species that was anywhere near it, and was almost entirely made up of large rocky worlds, except from a small gas giant in the outermost orbit of a red dwarf star. The humans had set up a complex mining operation there for almost anything anyone could want, especially the elite. So that was why the Chloraz decided to invade. It was a simple grab-and-snatch war at the start, and only really upset the pompous elites who either couldn't mine there safely or couldn't buy large amounts of jewelry. But the humans changed the face of the warfare in this war. They entered what had previously been a demilitarized zone with only 2 ships. This shocked the Glorras, as they were expecting a fierce retaliation which hadn't come. The Glorras on the surface of the planets laughed when they were informed of what was going on. Then the humans fired. Somehow, the humans had defied all the laws of physics, biology, chemistry, and robotics, and created the holy grail of nanotechnology: self-replication. This would be the envy of any civilization. The idea a nanobot could deconstruct something and reconstruct it into the exact duplicate of itself was like having robots that could use mitosis. But the humans were not interested in the medical uses, nor the uses for robotics. They wanted to use it for war, and they did. At first, a single missile rushed forwards towards the center of the Glorras fleet. The fleet, rather bemused, fired one missile which had, to their astonishment, been shielded. Most missiles and rockets were never, ever shielded because it took power away from the explosive. But this missile wasn't going to explode. It passed harmlessly through the fleet, which, by this point, had stopped shooting so they didn't hit themselves. And then the missile opened up into 4 parts. The nanobots swarmed out like a wasp hive and searched for their victims, latching onto ships. They hurriedly devoured their triple-lined Hadraxian plating, one of the most strongest metals in the known universe, until all that was left was a metal carcass in space which was in turn devoured into nothing. With each ship destroyed, the number of swarm only grew until it darkened out the very stars themselves, making a true inky blackness of space. Then, just like that, with the entire fleet devoured, the nanobots just turned off. Small scavenger ships were let loose to collect the bots. Some would be reused and some would be melted down to create new ships, which may have just become obsolete. Now the attention of the humans turned towards a very panic-stricken planet. There was no way out except death for those on the surface. All long-range ships were now gone, and human landing ships were entering the system at that very moment. The humans disembarked their ships just before they actually landed. They wore their typical heavy robotic armor, which seemed to always have infinite supply of energy for their guns. One of the men in suits charged at the enemy trench line that had been hurriedly created, but was slaughtered in the attempt. However, this only seemed to spur on his comrades, who all charged forwards and, soon enough, took the trench. The humans went planet by planet, accepting surrenders when they were offered and causing unimaginable chaos when they weren't. The system was almost entirely in human hands once more, with barely a fair fight on their hands. The last planet put up resistance, however. The way they saw it, they were as good as dead, and surrender was not an option. They'd gone into one of the skyscraper-like mining facilities, which served as the head of operations for the planet. They turned it into a fortress of unimaginable magnitude. Anyone going in would be decimated on the spot. The humans briefly thought about an orbital bombardment, but this had always been a fantasy, because you would have to be in the atmosphere for it to work, and you would blow your ship away with the flying, superheated debris. But the humans had their ways to get around such issues. The Glorras hadn't defended the outside, so the humans just planted explosives around the tower, left and brought it crumbling down without a single human casualty. After the battle, the Glorras ambassador asked why they'd been so brutal. "Why should we take casualties?" was the answer. "You should have surrendered." "It was only a minor border skirmish," Glorras tried to lie, but the human laughed derisively. "Minor? Our spies told us you've been planning this for over 3 years. You've got a flag for the area and everything. Or did you think the fact that no humans were there when you invaded wasn't suspicious? What? The ambassador said, mouth wide open. And if I were you, I would think twice before invading all of the other targets you have. We may have to invade you, and it would be rather clear that you hadn't learned your lesson. What lesson? The ambassador asked a bit too sarcastically. The human grinned. Hippity Hoppity, get off my property. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and